So this is chapter, alright, so it's the chapter 89. I'm just going to start from, and again they began to place before the tower a table, with every impure and unclean kind of bread on it. Moreover also, all the sheep were blind and could not see, as were the shepherds likewise. Thus were they delivered up to the shepherds for a great destruction, who trod them underfoot and devoured them. Yet was their Lord silent until all the sheep in the field were destroyed. The shepherds and the sheep were all mixed together, that they did not save them from the power of the beast. Then he who wrote the book ascended, exhibited it, and read it at the residence of the Lord of the sheep. He petitioned him for them and prayed, pointing out every act of the shepherds, and testifying before him against them all. Then taking the book, he deposited it with him and departed. And I observed during the time that thus 37 shepherds were overlooking, all of whom finished in their respective periods as the first. Others then received them into their hands, that they might overlook them in their respective periods, every shepherd in his own period. Afterwards I saw in the vision that all the birds of heaven arrived, eagles, the avis, kites, and ravens. The eagle instructed them all. They began to devour the sheep, to peck out their eyes, and to eat up their bodies. The sheep then cried out, for their bodies were devoured by the birds. I also cried out and groaned in my sleep against the shepherd which overlooked the flock. And I looked while the sheep were eaten up by the dogs, by the eagles, and by the kites. They neither left them their body, nor their skin, nor their muscles, until their bones alone remained, until their bones fell upon the ground, and the sheep became diminished. I observed likewise during the time that 23 shepherds were overlooking, who completed in their respective periods 58 periods. It's a lot of numbers here. Then there were small lambs born of those white sheep, who began to open their eyes and to see, crying out to the sheep. The sheep, however, cried not out to them, neither did they hear what they uttered to them, but were deaf, blind, and obdurate in the greatest degrees. I saw in the vision that ravens flew down upon those lambs, that they seized one of them, and that tearing the sheep in pieces, they devoured them. I saw also that horns grew upon those lambs, and that the ravens lighted down upon their horns. I saw too that a large horn sprouted out on an animal among the sheep, and that their eyes were opened. He looked to them, their eyes were wide open, and he cried out to them. Then the Dabella saw him, all of whom ran to him. Dabella, is this word in the dictionary, yo? There's the belly. Spicy Indian burger, served in a bun with chutney and garnishes. Oof, the belly burger. And besides this, all the eagles, the avis, so then the Dabella saw him, all of whom ran to him. And besides this, all the eagles, the avis, the ravens, and the kites were still carrying off the sheep, flying down upon them and devouring them. The sheep was silent, but the Dabella lamented and cried out. All the ravens contended and struggled with them. They wished among them to break his horn, but they prevailed not over him. I looked on them until the shepherds, the eagles, the avis, and the kites came, who cried out to the heavens to break the horn of the Dabella, to contend with him and to kill him. But he struggled with them and cried out, that help might come to him. Then I perceived that the man came who had written down the names of the shepherds, and who had ascended up before the Lord of the sheep. He brought assistance and caused everyone to see him descending to the help of the Dabella. I perceived likewise that the Lord of the sheep came to them in wrath, while all those who saw him fled away. All fell down in his tabernacle before his face, while all the eagles, the aves, ravens, and kites assembled and brought with them all the sheep of the field. All came together and strove to break the horn of the Dabella. Then I saw that the man who wrote the book at the word of the Lord opened the book of destruction, and that destruction which the last 12 shepherds wrought and pointed out before the Lord of sheep, that they destroyed more than those who preceded them. I saw that the Lord of the sheep came to see them, and taking in his hand the scepter of his wrath, seized the earth, which the man who wrote the book of the word of the Lord opened the book of destruction, and that destruction which the last 12 shepherds wrought and pointed out before the Lord of sheep, that they destroyed more than those who preceded them. I saw also that the Lord of the sheep came to them, and taking in his hand the scepter of his wrath, seized the earth, which became rent asunder, while all the beasts and the birds of heaven fell from the sheep and sunk into the earth, which closed over them. I saw too that a large sword was given to the sheep, who went forth against all the beasts of the field to slay them. But all the beasts and birds of heaven fled away from before their face, and I saw a throne erected in a delectable land. Upon this sat the Lord of the sheep, who received all the sealed books, which were opened before him. Then the Lord called the first 7 white ones, and commanded them to bring before him the first of the first stars, which preceded the stars whose form partly resembled that of horses. The first star, which fell down first, and they brought them all before him. And he spoke to the man who wrote in his presence, who was one of the 7 white ones, saying, Take those 70 shepherds, to whom I delivered up the sheep, and who receiving them killed more of them than I commanded. Behold, I saw them all bound and standing before him. First came on the trail of the stars, which being judged and found guilty went trial. First came on the trial of the stars, which being judged and found guilty went to the place of punishment. They thrust them into a place deep and full of flaming fire, and full of pillars of fire. Then the 70 shepherds were judged, and being found guilty, were thrust into the flaming abyss. At that time likewise I perceived that one abyss was thus opened in the midst of the earth, which was full of fire. And to this were brought the blind sheep, which being judged and found guilty, were all thrust into that abyss of fire on the earth and burned. The abyss was on the right of that house. And I saw the sheep burning, and their bones consuming. I stood beholding him emerge that ancient house, while they brought out its pillars, every plant in it, and the ivory enfolding in it. They brought it out and deposited it in a place on the right side of the earth. I also saw that the Lord of the sheep produced a new house, great and loftier than the former, which he bounded by the former circular spot. All its pillars were new, and its ivory new, as well as more abundant than the former ancient ivory which he had brought out. And while all the sheep were in the midst of it, and while all the sheep which were left were in the midst of it, all the beasts of the earth and all the birds of heaven fell down and worshipped them, petitioning them, and obeying them in everything. Then those 3 who were clothed in white and who, holding me by my hand, had before caused me to ascend, while the hand of him who spoke held me, raised me up, and placed me in the midst of the sheep, before the judgment took place. The sheep were all white, with wool long and pure. Then all who had perished and had been destroyed, every beast of the field and every bird of heaven, assembled in that house, while the Lord of the sheep rejoiced with great joy, because all were good and had come back again to his dwelling. And I saw that they laid down the sword which had been given to the sheep, and returned it to his house, sealing it up in the presence of the Lord. All the sheep would have been enclosed in that house, and it had been capable of containing them, and the eyes of all were open, gazing on the good one. Nor was there one among them who did not behold him. I likewise perceived that the house was large, wide, and extremely full. I saw too that a white cow was born, whose horns were great, and that all the beasts of the field and all the birds of heaven were alarmed at him, and entreated him at all times. Then I saw that the nature of all of them was changed, and that they became white cows, and that the first who was in the midst of them spoke, when that word became a large beast, upon the head of which were great and black horns, while the Lord of the sheep rejoiced over them and over the cows. I lay down in the midst of them. I awoke, and I saw the whole. This is the vision which I saw, laying down and waking. Then I blessed the Lord of righteousness and gave glory to him. Afterwards I wept abundantly, nor did my tears cease, so that I became incapable of enduring it. While I was looking on, they flowed on account of what I saw, for all was come and gone by. Every individual circumstance respecting the conduct of mankind was seen by me. In that night I remembered my former dream, and therefore wept and was troubled, because I had seen that vision. All right. I just like that, and I just feel like stopping here for now. It was really beautiful.